Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. Today, you get to meet Ashley. If you have not already met her on our Instagram lives or on videos that I coerce her to do, definitely our hypnobirthing students see her a lot because she teaches with me. But I'm excited for you to meet her and get to know her and love her the way I do. Ashley, I've came through my doula series like eons, like probably the second or third run through of that series a million years ago. And I was intimidated by how her brain worked. I will just tell you that. Did I tell you that, Ashley? Did I ever tell you that?
You've told me a couple times, which I just still cannot wrap my brain around.
Yeah, she could outthink me so fast that it was almost like I was going to answer the question or ask the question, and she already had the answer for it. It was phenomenal, and it also totally scared the crap out of me. I have now learned to harness her power and use it for good because it scared me at first. But we're really good opposites for each other. We balance each other out. She is kind of opposite where I'm the woo-woo one and she kind of brings me back to earth. And I was the religious spiritual one growing up and had all these big grandiose ideas. And then she goes, hey, and what about this? And offers me other, oh my gosh, insights that I never get. So Ashley has, if you can look in her background, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see all these little dolls behind her. They're not dolls. They're pops, I think. That's what they're called, right?
Technically they're dolls. They're like figures. Yeah, they're pop figures, Funko Pops. There's like a whole subculture of people who collect and all that with Funko Pops. So this is my little like cave of all my treasures where I don't have to share with my kids and I get to indulge in all my little nerdy joys. So,
well, and it's funny because I collect crystals and Ashley collects these. Yeah. And I think she's more relatable to dads than I am half the time because she's got Star Wars things behind her and a lightsaber and stuff that they relate to more than crystals that have sometimes rolled out of my bra when I'm in class. So, I'm excited for her to, I think I say I'm excited all the time, but I am excited for her to talk today a little bit about her birth, kind of what the themes of our birth was and what led us to becoming educators, becoming good advocates and sharing that with families and helping them have the best kind of birth that they can have. So I would first like you to tell everybody about you, give us a little background of who you are, where you came from and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, well, my birth story is very long and involved, and I will definitely be sharing that on a later episode. But I really appreciated in Care's episode where she was introducing herself. If you had the chance to listen to that, kind of hearing where she came from, her journey through the generations of her family that brought her to where she was, where she's, talking to us now and working with families and all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I feel like we do really complement each other because we do have similar backgrounds in some ways, but where Care really was always naturally very spiritual, I was always naturally very skeptical. And I do still find myself that way. And I, even as a very little kid, found myself really questioning, sort of the way things were around me all the time and the way things were expected to be. And even though I tried really hard to sort of fit in the molds that were presented to me, I struggled with it. And I can remember from a very young age having a really hard time understanding how people were believing, certain religious concepts or certain social constructs and saying things to my family like, that doesn't make sense. I don't understand. Explain it to me. And often being met with, well, it's just the way it is. Which really, I feel like fuels my fire that so much of what we still face in birth work is it's the way it's always been. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's done. And I forever and always will have a hard time accepting that as an answer. And so similar to Care, I was raised in a, fairly conservative religious sort of waspy upbringing where there wasn't a lot of emotion shared. Although I, really love my family, there wasn't a lot of deep connections fostered. And that was something that I also was really hungry for as I was growing up, was like deeper connections. I ended up like really seeking that in friendships because I wasn't finding that in my family. We're sort of just raised in that very common thing, especially with parents from the baby boomer generation, raised by families from the silent generation, that you just don't talk about it. So for a inquisitive, skeptical, curious girl who was hungry for deeper relationships and meaning, I was not being fed in that way. And so
it's so funny because we were both longing for that connection, but I didn't have words for it. I wanted someone to see me and I wanted to see them. And I think I could see them way more than they could see me. And I didn't have the words for it until I was an adult. So
Yes.
I think it's interesting. We both have that same longing, which I believe all of us have. We might not have the words for it, but we want deeper connection. That surface stuff doesn't do it.
Yes. And the thing that will be that theme that carries through my pregnancy and my birth as well is that search for understanding. I wanted to understand the world, the universe, society. Why are things this way? Why do we believe these things? Why is this how things are structured? And, now in my late 30s, do I still have those answers? Not to a lot of the questions that I am still asking in my life, but I know how to look for things that quench those questions. And like a beautiful thing about the coming up as a millennial is the access to information and the access to technology to feed so many of those curiosities. I attend TikTok University on the regular now, and I've learned so much even about myself in the last few years, going through the pandemic and using the internet now in a way to really connect with people and learn new things about the world. And it's one of those kind of side bonuses of such a terrible time, is just the journey that I feel like many of us have been on now over the last few years of really finding ourselves and understanding ourselves through these communities that we can create. I mean, even now, you and I, we're not in the same place. We're not in the same state. We're not in the same city. We're very far away, but this technology and all of that has really facilitated a lot of connection. And that is another thing that just really works for my brain. And the whole other sort of aspect to me and my personality, and really something that I struggled with coming up in the environment that I grew up in, is being undiagnosed ADHD until I was an adult. I know a lot of people are going through the journeys now of sort of self-diagnosis, self-discovery, figuring out by hearing other people talk like, hey, I might be neurodiverse. And even I have started to sort of adjust my lens of how I see myself. I've always been like, I have ADHD. There may be more going on there. But really living with it my whole life and having to, live with this brain that was so different from everybody else's and figure out how to move through the world. That I feel like now in my adulthood, I've really recognized like it's a superpower. I can harness it for good. As you said, I can utilize it to help people, to help families, to help my kids who are also neurodiverse to move through the world and hopefully, ultimately, make the world a better, kinder place for people who don't necessarily fit in the molds that have been set out for us in society for so long. So, that's like my...
We tag you with neurospicy because you are freaking neurospicy.
Exactly. Yeah, because I don't know that I have exactly one specific diagnosis, but I do know there's a lot going on up here. But I am really trying to embrace it and, rather than see it as a deficit, see it as a gift that I can utilize if I can figure out how to work with myself rather than work against myself. So, that's really where I was coming from, both going into parenthood and then ultimately coming into birth work. And it was by way of becoming a parent that I started in birth work, like so many birth workers, like care. That journey to, for me, becoming a mother and starting my family and everything that went into it, and the really sort of dynamic way by which I became a parent, the sort of not typical way by which I became a parent,
Well,
is
and
sort
talk
of
about that,
thrust me
Ash.
into that.
Yeah, and talk
Yeah.
about that, Ashley, because you do have a different birth story background of how you came into your pregnancy. And I'm sure that led into different themes because just say.
Yeah. Yeah. So, of course, if you do any, iota of research on me at all, if you see any pictures of me, you will see that I have 3 kids that look like they're about the same age. And that's because they literally are the same age. I had triplets in 2011, and it was my first pregnancy. It was spontaneous and a complete surprise and shock to both. Well, to everybody in our families, but for my husband and I especially, it just knocked us off our feet when we found out that we were having 3 babies at one time. And that was just the first hurdle, or I should say series of left turns that happened in that pregnancy and my birth, that I know that there's so many themes for everybody, no matter if this is your first pregnancy, your 15th pregnancy, if you're having 1 baby, 3 babies, 6 babies, that there are universal themes of becoming a parent and starting your family and pregnancy anxieties and all of that stuff. But I feel like when you go through a extraordinary version of it, something that is so outside of what is sort of typically expected, it just adds so much more to it, like care coming from your lost background and sort of what you went through to get to meeting Finley. And then for me, I didn't have that long journey to become pregnant, but then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you don't get the typical pregnancy experience. You don't get a bump that grows at a normal rate. You don't get to, have one doctor's appointment a month. You don't get to, sort of go to normal birth classes, plan your typical birth, because everything's so elevated, everything's so high risk, everything's so heightened that it really was very different. So while there's definitely universal themes, it was so heightened. That's sort of the way that I can kind of describe it. And I remember initially feeling robbed of what I knew. I just innately knew in my heart when I found out I was having 3 that I was not going to be having a typical pregnancy journey. And I remember feeling a little bit resentful about that. And even that probably carried into postpartum as well, of why was this so hard? The other side of it was I was going to get 3 babies out of it, which is incredible. And when I look back at what we were going through in terms of our relationship and our families and all of that, I know that we had 3 at one time for a reason, because we needed to have these 3 kids. And if they were spaced out or meant to come at different times, they would have, or maybe we would only have had one of them, and then we wouldn't have gone on to have the other 2. And so I know that this complete set of kids showed up at the right time that they were supposed to complete our family at the time that they did. But it's been a
complete
really
set. I love that.
Complete set. Yeah. I mean, they complement each other. They are so unique. And we'll definitely be talking about that on future episodes, multiples and everything that goes into it. But they came into our lives exactly how they were supposed to, as who they were supposed to be. But I think so many people, it's a long journey of understanding why your pregnancies go the way they go, your birth goes the way it goes, the transformation into parenthood that is just so not even talked about in society, that so many of us, when we find ourselves on the other side of pregnancy, are like, who am I? And that was a huge thrust for me, that who am I piece, and how did I get here, and why do I have 3 babies, and who trusted me with this, and now what? Is really what thrust me into pursuing birthwork and finding my passion ultimately, which again is another, when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, look at how all of these dominoes fell the way that they were supposed to bring you to where you are now, to end up doing what you did and what I have done now for the last 10 years of supporting families, educating families, meeting you, and everything that has come from that really goes back to that. What do you mean I'm having 3 babies? in that doctor's office. I mean, if that hadn't happened, I don't know that I would be here. I don't know that I would be doing anything like this. And that's really, it's been an amazing, hard, incredible, wonderful, difficult journey to figure it all out.
I kind of feel the same way. If Finley hadn't almost died at birth and all of, planning a funeral and doing all that stuff that you would never expect to do, and feeling absolutely transformed by the experience, we probably would have just gone on to have other kids. Like it wouldn't have been a big deal. Like, okay, her birth was great. Check it off. Let's have another one. Probably would have been a home birth, whatever, which was not meant to be, because then I would have been raising how many kids by myself when he left. So it is amazing how everybody has a transformation when it comes to birth. And that either can be through trauma or some triumph and trauma, or a series of just triumph. And I think that's where education comes in. That's why both of us are like, can we scream it from the rooftops? Because you do have some choice in preparing, but you have to let go of the outcome and see where that transformation leads you, and what beautiful changes it can have, because it does change you. And I thank you. I appreciate you being honest about feeling resentful a little bit about some of that, because I also felt that when Finley was like, when we were faced with, she's not going to be that normal, typical kid. And while I was so grateful just to have her alive, I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, this is everybody's worst nightmare.
You and I can really relate on, and even it carries through parenthood, right? It's sort of like, no milestones are typical when you have a special needs child, which I also have two, or when you have multiples, because it's like every first is the last. I had 3 start kindergarten. I'm never going to have another child start kindergarten. I have 3 going to middle school. I will never have another child going to middle school. I didn't have a typical breastfeeding journey. I did not have a typical postpartum healing. I will never have a postpartum recovery physically in my body that someone who had 1 baby will ever have, because of what having 3 babies does to my body. And so, I think that you'll get nothing out of this podcast more than honesty. And I think that's going to be really great for helping people, hear us and appreciate what we're saying, and also be able to relate. Like, we're going to be really real about this. Motherhood is not all sunshine and rainbows. And especially when you're given a special circumstance like that it just flips everything upside down. And it's beautiful. It's sweet and sour. You can be resentful and love your kids. And I feel like that's a journey too, that you're not always just like, okay, and now I'm grateful, the resentment is gone. No.
Nope. Doesn't work like that.
No. Do you know how expensive it is getting 3 kids ready to start middle school all at one time? I'm feeling a little resentful about the fact, but it doesn't mean that I don't love my kids. It doesn't mean that I'm not so like deeply grateful in my soul to have them, and they're here, and for everything, all of the blessings that have come with that. But we're in the business of being real on this podcast.
Well, and also I think because what we run up against in class when we're doing fear releases and working with parents through their fears, one that they don't want to mention, but is always on their fear release sheet is, what if my kid has special needs? What if my kid passes away? What if my kid, doesn't have, because it's something in their family, like a genetic, disorder? What if they do have this? And because Ashley and I both come from, we are the what if, we can tell you that you're going to have good days and bad days, just like you would if your kid was typical. I have friends that just, their kids are driving them nuts. They're tearing the house apart. They're just being normal kids. And I'm like, if the house is a mess, that's my fault, because my kid can't move. So you have good and bad with all of it. And it's whatever journey you're given, there are people that have that journey that you can relate to, talk to, and get advice from. And Ashley and I have been really lucky that I can call her and say, this is what's going on at Children's and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, ask for this. And she'll call me in the middle of the night, like, we're at the emergency room again. And there's that, because we've done it so many times with each other, it is nice to have that companionship, especially as a single mom, because I know I can always call her no matter what and say, okay, this is what they're saying to me. What choice do I make here? give me some background. And she can literally go into that beautiful brain that I love so much and pull out information for me to quickly research on Google or ask questions about.
Yeah.
So,
and I think I actually had a dad a few series ago who shared very candidly, like, I'm very afraid of having a special needs child. And we had this beautiful conversation about your child chooses you and this child already trusts you. They're here, they're gestating, and they're going to be who they're going to be. You know, we get very little say in what genetics we pass on to our kids or what they're going to go through when they're born. I mean, there are choices we can make, and that's a huge part of what this podcast is about. But there's only so much we can control. And, you know, I have two kids who are very different ends of the spectrum in terms of what their special needs are, but they're both so incredible. And I really wanted to relate to him and the other parents in that series. Like, having a child with special needs is not the end of the world. It's just a different destination than where you thought you were going to end up. But that's for me, the theme through my whole pregnancy, right? It's just like, I thought my destination was a birth center with a water birth with one baby. And then in a couple years later, have another baby. And then a couple years later, have another baby. And my kids said, no, no, that's not what's going to happen. And so, yeah, I think that that's another thing too that I'm really looking forward to being able to sort of relay in a really positive way to families, is that the destination ultimately is going to be what it's going to be. But our job and our hope is to get you there in a way that is positive, that is has the least traumatic, impact for you and your child, and that is ultimately it's beautiful, right? That it's healing and it's calm and it's respectful and it's connected. That's what we're all about, rather than this is what the ultimate outcome has to be, because we are human beings. That cannot be predicted. So, yeah,
well,
that's
and it's
pretty special.
leading our families to connection. If there's anything that I want my kids to feel, it's connected to me. And funny that this is coming up for me right now. I just, I used to do all my scrapbooking online. And when Finley came, it got really hard to do because she's so much care. And when my older daughter turned 21, I made her a book of advice that went, I did 21 pieces of advice from her mom. Okay, she's 26 and I just finished it 2 days ago. It was all done except for the spelling. Like, I had to go back and do that. And I just forgot and let it. And then I just was a jerk and never finished it. And I went back and got it printed. It's on its way. So if she hears this before, it's on its way. And I realized that the one thing that I could offer her is something that I never had with my mom. And as I read back those pieces of advice that I wrote 6-7 years ago, I was like, man, this is good stuff. I am so grateful for all the junk that I went through and the right therapists and friends and family and birth workers that were able to support me through this understanding so that this is what I could gift her. And I couldn't ask for anything else. And I think that is part of the reason that we're educators, is we want your connection to be so brilliant with your children that they feel so loved, so respected, so heard, and so seen by you, because that's what changes the future. And it is way less about vaginal, non-vaginal, medicated, non-medicated. What about the connection? What made you feel seen and heard throughout your birth? What did you learn? That transformation piece through education and the experience makes a huge difference, like a huge difference.
I mean, that's literally the nail on the head of, like, the foundation of what we teach is connection. And we want parents to see this opportunity, see parenthood as an opportunity to give your kids what you craved, or pass along to your kids what you loved about your childhood. What were you looking for as a child? What were you seeking? Or what did you get from your parents that made you feel whole and loved that you can pass along? And you have this incredible opportunity when you're becoming a parent to make choices from the very beginning to set yourself up for this beautiful relationship with your child. And you're right, that's really what it's all about. It's not about necessarily, like I said, the final destination or the door your baby comes out of, or the 4 walls and roof that surround it, whether you choose a home birth, birth center, hospital birth. It's really about the education, the intention, and the thought about wanting your babies to have this experience coming into the world and wanting to parent your babies and children in a way that is loving and meaningful. And that, I mean, that's really what we're all about. So.
In my episode, my intro episode, I talked a little bit, Ashley, about the wounding that sometimes doulas have that we don't realize, that we see over and over in our birth rooms with parents, because we haven't looked at our internal stuff yet. So we're constantly rewounding ourselves by attracting the same pattern within those births. Do you have any wounding that you saw, now that you're a birth worker, that you saw in your past that came over, that kept showing up, that maybe having 3 babies kind of brought that out and helped you heal from?
Yeah. And it's certainly been a journey. And I it's interesting because for me, my relationship with my husband, we're very codependent. We're very close. We're best friends. And
I love that you admit it. We're very codependent.
We are very, both of us are coming from backgrounds of where we had a lot of healing to do. And, for both of us, we went on sort of incredible healing journeys through meeting our kids that if you had told us, like, when you have a baby, it's going to set you off on a path of having to confront all of your wounds and your deficits and all of that, I would have been like, okay, woo woo, get out of here. I'm just having a baby. I'm making my baby registry. And, so well, we were so excited, instantly when we found out we were having triplets, my husband's initial reaction was, oh my God, siblings. It was the first words that came out of his mouth. And when I look back on it, I realized that was the first match strike in my brain of something big is happening here right now.
Because he was an only child.
He was an only child raised by a single mom. And I realize looking back now that this, again, when we look back at it all and you're like, look at how these dominoes fell, that these kids needed to come together for him, right? As part of why they came together is for him, because he needed to see that beautiful sibling relationship, to be able to foster a sibling relationship, to be able to grow from that. And it's been so incredibly healing for him. But both of us also came from a place of knowing that we wanted to parent different than we were parented. Both of us came from families that struggled in areas that both of us really were lacking in terms of what we got from our parents, especially as adults looking back on it, realizing, wow, I really missed this. I hear people talk about these relationships, or I see people, have these relationships with their families that I don't feel like I have. And in having our kids, we realized, well, we really get to hit the reset button. We get to foster whatever relationship we want to have with our children. And it's about wanting to have that relationship, right? So we were able to heal a lot of wounds by just even that anticipation of becoming a family and growing in that parental role together. But then especially for my husband, coming from that single parent background, when I had my kids, I wasn't able to be with them right away. He was with them immediately. From the first moments, from their first breaths, from the first hand that touched them was his, that solidified him in that father role that I think he was always a bit, am I capable, right? Questioning of that without having that parental role in my life. Am I gonna have that innately in me? And it was literally, it was thrust upon him that you are going to be the only parent for a little while, for the first few hours of these kids' lives. And you're going to be the one holding their hand when they take their first breath, and holding them for the first time, and all of that, taking their first pictures. And just, I think that was an incredible moment for him to realize like, oh no, you already are their dad. You were their dad the moment they were created. You have been their dad this whole time they've been growing. They know you, and here you are. Like, these are your children. This is your role. You have a family, and that's never going to change. And I think so that was incredibly healing for him. And then for me, seeing that relationship facilitated with my kids and their dad, like him being such an active participant in the whole process, in the pregnancy, in the birth, in the care for them, has been incredibly healing for me, coming from a place of, you know, two working parents. And again, looking for that family connection that really never went beyond like a very surface level. And for my husband and I has been, you know, this whole journey of becoming parents, and then me getting into birthwork and the exploration that has taken me on has really created and fostered a very deep exploration for both of us into like our who we are, where we come from, our inner children, and all of that healing. Every time I take a workshop or read a book or watch a TED Talk, I come home and just like dump it all over him. But I think for him, it's been, you know, like through me, been able to really heal a lot of those wounds, and even be able to let go of stuff. Not everything is going to be healed, right? But it's about letting go of what isn't necessary for you. And just, I think it's been really great for both of us. So, and then I also find that I have a very positive relationship with the partners that I work with in, my doula relationships and my students, because I am seeking out and attracting partners who are involved and excited and are ready to like dive in. And I think that those are the families that hire me, because that is what I really am like searching for in families I support, is people who are so excited to support and be a parent, or even if it's not a romantic partner or like a biological parent, that they have these people in their lives who are like, we are all in on this. It means so much to me and has been so incredibly healing for me to see people so invested in their children and in their parenthood journeys. Like, I love it. And it's been just like so refreshing for me.
Well, and I don't even know if this is the right time to bring this up, because I'm sure this is going to come in another episode. But one of the things that we learned in a workshop with Honor Verwal was to have a conversation with our kids when they first became verbal about what they remember about their birth, because kids do have an open subconscious until they're about, 6 or 7, and everything is still in that state of imagination. They remember everything, like I talked about, from the beginning all the way through. They might not have words for it. So as one of the things that she explained to us is that if you sit next to them when they're 2.5, 3, and they've got their verbal skills going, and you're just playing alongside of them, hit record and ask them about their birth and see what comes out. And I think we should have a whole episode of that, because we have so many birth workers who did this and got these cool stories from their kids that they could have never gotten. So
and students who shared their stories with us about their memories and their kids' memories. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So tell me what happened when you talked to your 3 about their one birth experience that wasn't really
there's
one.
2 in particular. The one doesn't really like to talk about it. And, she is just a naturally more timid person, and also doesn't do well with like sort of difficult situations, doesn't like to talk about it. She's very reserved. And so my birth being the craziness that it was, like I said, I will share that story at another time, but you can even just kind of imagine like having 3 babies, how chaotic that would be. She's not really into it. And so I never really pushed her, but the other 2 had a lot to say on the subject, which if you ever met my kids, that makes a lot of sense, that they have a lot to say about a lot of things. And my daughter, who was born first, baby A, as they label them in multiple pregnancies, was born not breathing. And she was resuscitated, and my husband was with her when that happened. I was not, because I was in the other room having the other 2. And for her journey getting here was rough. And I asked W questions, as we often put them, like who, what, where, when, why, because as Anna says, ask very open-ended questions. Let them express what they see, what they feel. We don't want to lead them. So I asked her, who was there when you were born? And she said, Daddy. And I said, Daddy was there? She said, yeah, he was holding my hand. And I want to say she was just about 4, either close to turning 4 or just turned 4. So in that, younger age range where they still can probably access those memories, but they're starting to have the language to be able to actually express, what they're seeing in their head. And I have a picture from their birth that my nurse took of my husband holding her hand when she took her first breath. And she, at that point, had never seen that picture. I don't know to this day if she's still ever seen those pictures from her birth. But she had a very clear image in her mind that the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was her dad. And as difficult as that birth was, and as hard as it is to sort of have your babies but not meet your babies right away, that journey for him and for her was incredibly healing for me, because knowing that she had him from the very beginning, from her first breath, from her first eyes being open, was like enough for me. Right. And so her saying that was just like, because of course, in my mind, I can see that picture of that moment happening. Like, yes, he was. Yes, he was holding your hand. Yes, he was there when you opened your eyes. And she also told me that we were all playing together wherever we were before, and they said it's time to go. So we came here together. I don't know who they is. I don't know what that means.
My
as Karen and I always talk about, I'm not a
does.
spiritual person, and so I'm never going to be able to like qualify that or quantify it in any meaningful way for myself. Like, who is they? What were they talking about? But again, it kind of solidified that whole, they are supposed to be here together. Right. And then my son's so interesting because he is not neurotypical. He also has a bit of a photographic memory. And he still describes stuff that happened from like birth, infancy, all of that in ways that I'm like, how do you remember this? I don't understand how he has like a supercomputer brain. And so I asked him, what do you remember about your birth, or who was there? I can't remember the exact wording, but he said, it was so loud and it was so cold and there were so many babies crying and so many grownups yelling. And I can imagine in like an emergency birth situation to a baby that it would be loud and cold. And there were babies. I don't know if he was talking about his sisters or if he was talking about the NICU. But he just has this recollection of like many babies crying. And then he said, but I liked your belly. Your belly was so nice, so warm, so comfy. But I wanted to know what you looked like. I could only hear you. I couldn't see you. And then the like pièce de résistance, like the most appropriate thing for him to ever say as the child that he is, which is as I tell people, a glass half empty kind of guy, right? He's always, here's what is not great about my day. Here's what's not great about the world. It's never, here's what's so good. And, he basically said, you want to know what was so annoying about your belly? All right. Tell me what's so annoying. I wanted to talk to baby A or baby B. I want to talk to baby B the whole time, but I was stuck by baby A the whole time and I don't like her. And I wanted to talk to baby B and I had to talk to baby A the whole time. And when they were in my belly, he was on my left hip and baby A was right in the middle with her head by the exit. That's why she was baby A. And baby B was over on my right hip. So she was literally right between them. And to this day, they are just like, it's like It's like an immovable force, unstoppable object colliding those two kids. And it's like from the womb, she was in his way. She was annoying him. And, you know, that they both are very like close to their other sister. My husband and I were just talking about this yesterday, like very doting on her. They both are very like besties with her. And then they're constantly fighting with each other. And I was like, it literally goes back to the womb. It literally goes back to where those flippin' eggs landed and implanted.
Isn't it funny?
That you still see this carry over into their relationships now. It's just so wild. So yeah, I mean, that was such an interesting thing for me too, because when I first came, again, skeptic, right? It's literally my nature. I come into this work, I take your hypnobirthing class. We see in this video where they say this little girl talked about her birth and showed what happened in her birth and blah, blah, blah. And I left that class being like, that was awesome. That last little bit about the little girl and her birth, that's BS. That did not happen. Kids do not remember their births. That is nonsense. And then I met Anna, and then I took her workshop, and I had sessions with her, and then I talked to my kids, and I was like, oh my God. I was so wrong. That, of course, like, I mean, even if you are not spiritual, we have to recognize with our incredible, unique human minds that everything we experience leaves an impression on us. And that includes being born.
It's all recorded.
Yes, we are not born potatoes, right? We're born with our little processors already running. And so, of course, whether it is actual memories or physical impressions or nervous system, issues or trauma or a deep connection to our parent because we had that skin to skin, whatever it is recorded in our body. It is on a cellular level, it's recorded in our brain. And like I tell parents who are skeptical, you have subconscious experiences all the time. Why do you know that jingle on the radio? Is it because you sat there and memorized it? Or is it because you hear it and your brain hears it and it absorbs it? And now you've memorized it. That's your subconscious. And so everything you have experienced in your life, it's filed away. Just because you don't have access to it anymore doesn't mean it's not there. And I feel like that really helps them relate to like, oh, yeah, so you're not saying this is like a little, pixie dust that got sprinkled on my kid and, now like magically they can remember their birth. No, I'm talking about us recording our human experiences starting from a very young age. And anybody who's studied child development will tell you that pregnancy and birth has an impact on the developing human on a mental, emotional, physical level. And, we talk a lot about, special needs and birth defects and, genetic conditions and that kind of stuff. But it's more than that. It's what you talked about in your episode, epigenetics, what's passed on to us, what we experience in the womb. And it creates a lot of empathy too, like even talking about generationally, you talking about your family's experience, even just thinking about sort of what as a generation, the silent generation, what were they baked in? Baby boomers, what were they baked in that has left an impression on generations and generations of people. And hopefully with what we're doing, with our awareness, with our consciousness, with our connection, again, another beautiful thing that the internet provides is this connection and this access to information to try and be aware and make some changes and do some things differently. And I hope that I did that in my pregnancy with my kids. I hope I continue to do it in my parenting. And hopefully as they go on and have kids, that it'll be even better with them, right? Each generation going forward, trying to make things incrementally better in how we gestate, how we birth, and how we raise our children, right?
It's absolutely why we teach. It's what we do. And the woo side of me says that we are spiritual beings having an earthly experience. It's just what is. And yeah, our classes definitely reflect it. Every product we put out reflects it. But I also have seen the transformation of parents that come in wanting the knowledge. And then as that knowledge comes, and then they go, oh my gosh, there are things I need to look at. And just having that awareness, you make different choices for your son's or daughter's birth, right? You ask different questions. You start to guide it for how is this going to work for them? Yeah, I'm the one responsible for the pain and the movement and all of that. But the choices are much bigger when you have the awareness that there's another person or persons that all of this affects, as well as our backgrounds, what has been passed on, because we don't know exactly. Like, I can't go back to my great 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 grandmother, what she passed on through that to my grandmother, through my mom, but it's there because the impressions were there, right? And only we can heal what we feel comes up. So, yeah, it's beautiful. It is confronting at times.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it is,
but I think it's that awareness. It's like I tell parents all the time. It's the fact that you're even curious means you're doing things differently, right? Going back to always just doing what we were told or doing the things the way they were always done, or like, just not even thinking of the consciousness of our children or our babies. The fact that you're even looking at birth classes, that you're worrying about these things, that you're conscious of these things, means you are already a good parent. Bad parents don't care. Bad parents aren't exploring this stuff. And so just the desire, the hunger, even that little inkling, if it's just a little bit of something, it's like, I think I need to explore this. I think I need to look into this. I think I want to be conscious of this. It puts you on the path already towards being a great parent for your child.
And sometimes it's our second or third birth. Like, we just go, whoa, why is this happening again to me? And it's those patterns, those repeated patterns that we see in our life you don't even have to be a parent to see repeated patterns, right? But once you become aware of it, it changes everything. And I'm saying TikTok University, your people are there. I'm kind of upset that I didn't do TikTok during the pandemic, because I think I would have had way more support than I did, because I felt so isolated. That was the hardest spiritual year of my life, financial too, but spiritual. And it was also the most transformative. But I think, man, my people were there and I didn't know that. And I heard everyone talking about it and I was like, focus on the business.
Well, you think it's just like funny dances, right? And then when you start realizing like, oh my God, I am learning so much, and just expanding my worldview and even making some shifts in myself about who I thought I was and all that, because really what these apps provide, if you use them correctly, is an ability to relate to and connect to other people. And I think that really that's what it comes down to, whether it's podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. You can use it to foster connection, or you can use it to create a fake version of your life and keep everything very false and surface. Yep. And I think that's what a lot of people fall into, keeping everything very shallow, which that's humans, isn't it? But I am on the hope and journey, and I think that you are too, and so many people we are, that like, no, we can use this to actually create connection. We can use this to foster a deeper understanding and like connection to humanity. And again, goes back to the theme from the beginning of harnessing powers for good, rather than letting technology run us or take away from our lives. Like, let it add value, and let us use technology to add value to other people's lives. It's really what we're all in.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed Ashley today, because you're going to enjoy a lot of her. She's amazing. She's fun. I think we do complement each other. She has way more of a filter than I do, so there'll be less curse words on her end.
I've been honing it for 10 years, but you're going to hear us, especially when we get a little fired up. There'll probably be some F-bombs flying back and forth.
A few, but anyway, we will see you on our next episode.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to birtheducationcenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.